And I do think so much of what we're hearing about truck parking is because of, frankly, what we've been doing to highlight this issue. The lawmakers we've been working with have been enormously helpful advocates, but it's not just members of Congress, but you have broad industry support on this. So we're working with ATA to try and get this over the finish line. We have trucking safety groups that are supportive, law enforcement groups that are on board. You're right, it is really important that there's tons of buy-in.
Welcome to Stream, a trucktractortrailer.com production. My name is Zach Miller. I'm your host, and I'm really excited today to be joined by Bryce Mungen from the Owner-Operator Independent Driver Association, talking about some really important developments here. As we know, anybody in trucking knows, and certainly we've talked about this on Stream a lot, truck parking has reached crisis levels around this country. It is a major safety issue and a major economic issue, the lack of safe overnight truck parking for our hardworking truckers out there. But Bryce, it looks like there are some positive developments going on to rectify this issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something that we've been working on for a long time. As an association, been working on this for decades. We know it's been a problem for decades. Just to give it a brief as history as possible, back in 2020, there was legislation introduced in the House of Representatives. Representative Mike Bost from Illinois and Representative Angie Craig, Minnesota, they introduced legislation to funding for truck parking. Basically, would establish a grant program, and that would be solely dedicated to truck parking and expanding truck parking capacity. So we've been working on that all along. That legislation passed the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee earlier this year in July 2022. And now just last week, we have exciting developments in the Senate where effectively the same legislation was introduced. Again, it's Senators Cynthia Lummis from Wyoming and Mark Kelly from Arizona. The legislation is very similar, almost identical. It set funding aside to be used exclusively for expanding truck parking capacity. So we're excited about this. Both bills are bipartisan, and now we can really move forward in the Senate on this.
And that ties into one of the themes of infrastructure, at least with the current administration, is they want it done in a bipartisan way. The fact that both bills have similar language, the fact that both are bipartisan, the fact that the mouthpiece for the administration on infrastructure, Secretary Buttigieg, has talked loudly about the need for truck parking, it seems like it's kind of aligned to get this done.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think so much of what we're hearing about truck parking is because of, frankly, what we've been doing to highlight this issue. But we definitely have, certainly with the lawmakers we've been working with, have been enormously helpful advocates. And the other issue, too, you mentioned it's bipartisan. In the House, we have everyone from liberal Democrats in California to conservative Republicans in Texas who are co-sponsoring the bill. But it's not just members of Congress, but you have broad industry support on this. So we're working with ATA to try and get this over the finish line. We have trucking safety groups that are supportive, law enforcement groups that are on board. You're right, it is really important that there's tons of buy-in, and we've been talking to the administration as well, sending them letters, making sure that they know it's a problem that needs to be addressed. So we've done as much as we can to build up the conversation around this. And it is frustrating. It's not very satisfying for us all the time to come back and be like, they're talking about this, because it's easy to talk about stuff. But we even did see they did award some grant money for truck parking projects, DOT that is, they did money for truck parking projects. So we are starting to see some results from them on their own too. So you're right. This is hopefully something that with everything going on, we're able to get it over the finish line.
And I guess just the last point about that, is there anything else you need the listenership to do? Do you need them to contact their local representative, their senator? What do you need from the people who listen to this, people in trucking, to push us over the finish line?
Yeah, that's exactly right. What needs to happen now is we need to build up more support in the Senate to get it to a point where they can't keep sitting on it. We want leadership in the Senate to move. We want the Senate committee with responsibility over this to bring it up and pass it out of committee for a vote. So really, the way to do that is to contact your senators. I'll put a plug in for our advocacy website at fortruckers.com. You can go there, sign up for updates, but you can find where we have our campaigns. You just click there, put your information in, and we've got some talking points you can send, but you can type your own message up to your senators, or you can give them a call. And the one thing I always say is don't be afraid. If you're trucking, you're an expert on this issue, and they need to be listening to you. It's important to speak up on it.
Absolutely. Well said. As you and I did joke before we fired up the microphone here, I am of the philosophy that every pun is intended here on Stream. Switching gears here, let's talk about another issue that that IDA is really focused on current event wise is the surveillance on truck drivers. What's happening with that right now?
Yes, so FMCSA put out this proposal and they're looking for information on regulation that would require trucks to have a what they're calling a unique electronic buyer, or
Mm,
basically like a tracking device that would allow for the identification of a truck that's going down the highway while it's in motion. So what they're looking for is basically this piece of equipment that would transmit information to law enforcement at any time they're trying to like request it and pull it off the truck. And we have a whole host of concerns about this, especially privacy first and foremost. Talk to almost any trucker, and I'm sure they'll tell you they didn't get into the industry to have the government down their necks on things. And we already know from ELDs and all the other surveillance that's out there, there's plenty of regulation, plenty of surveillance, and we still see crash rates going in the wrong direction. This mandate, what they're looking for, what they say they want to do, and they, FMCSA and law enforcement, which has requested FMCSA do this, is they say we'll be able to focus on high risk carriers because we won't have to pull everybody over. We'll be able to know who that is going down the highway. So we can pull up their DOT number, their name, what have you. But it's not just that. The FMCSA is asking, should we include information about the driver? Do they have their medical certification up to date? Are they up to date on all their other fees? So this is just a Pandora's box. And also, too, it's going to take the focus off of safety enforcement, because if you're just focusing on like, all right, what data can I pull off the road? Am I just going to wait for the unsafe carrier to come by? Does that mean law enforcement's less likely to be looking for unsafe behavior and what else they can actually observe on the road? So this is something we're fighting right now.
yeah, I would agree with you on that, especially if the purpose of this is being sold as a way to reduce crashes. I see no connection between that
Yeah,
and
and
doing
yeah, and
it.
I should say, I think that's something they're implying. I think what they're trying to sell this as, oh, good carriers, you'll be so much better off because we'll leave you alone when we see that you're good moving down the road. But that's a whole other concern with you have bad data going in
Uh,
at CSA stores. So if you're pulling bad data out, it's not going to work.
yeah, I think you hit on some two really good points there. First of all, I don't see this as the cause to get fleets with bad CSA scores. I don't see this as what's going to get them to start to clean it up. They need to
Right.
get it cleaned up, but I don't see this as that sort of inciting incident, so to speak.
Mhm.
Second thing is, and I'm so glad it's your organization that's really focusing on this, because you could talk among law enforcement and safety advocates, and I could understand where they think this makes sense. Where it becomes problematic, I think, is that fundamental misunderstanding of how the industry works, because a unsafe carrier may contract half their fleet out to owner operators. The
Mhm.
question becomes, where is that unsafety really? Is it with the fleet drivers, or is it with one or two bad independent contractors? And how many actually safe drivers are going to get caught up in a dragnet like
Sure.
that under the guise of there's one unsafe?
I think that speaks to our frustration with just so many regulations that come out of FMCSA, which is how do you write regulations that work for a one truck carrier, also work for a 1,000 truck carrier? It also, too, you, I think, alluded to it a little bit, but there's also that compliance burden, too. A one truck carrier, a small carrier, this is just something else. You're going to have to make sure the transponder is working, the information's up to date. And if, it's not, you can get dinged for that. So it's taking the focus off of safety, we think, too. If this is one more thing you're worrying about before you head out, it's less time to focus on other important things.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think that's where it's that we don't know exactly where it is, but we know
Mhm.
the fine line between technology enhancing safety and then it's starting to curve downward a little bit. And something like this could be that curve downward.
Yeah.
It definitely makes some sense. And especially too, because you alluded to it, we know the crash numbers are going in the wrong direction.
Mm.
There are a couple of theories behind it, but one of them is definitely distracted driving.
Yeah.
And there's just too much stimulation going on in the cab right now. If we're going to add more to it, I think
Yeah.
we need a damn good reason for it. And this, on a first glance, doesn't seem like it.
Yeah, that's exactly it. One of the other things we've said is we've heard about law enforcement able to use cameras to pull information off the side of a truck, pull off the identifying information. And we're like, if you're saying you can already do that, then why not just keep doing that? Why? So you want to place the burden on the carriers to do this? Yeah, to your point, we don't see where the benefit at all with this is.
So definitely, especially you owner operators, definitely be sure to join OOIDA, make sure to get on their mailing list,
Yeah.
and always make sure to contact your local representatives just to tell them what's going on. You don't have to be nasty about it. Just let them know what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. They don't do this for a living. You do. So they need to be hearing from you. And it's wonderful, Bryce, the work that you and your team do to educate many of our representatives up there in Washington.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you. And like you said, getting involved, if they're going to be any good at their jobs, they need to be listening to truckers.
If you like the content, please subscribe, and we'll see you next time on Stream.